Hi everyone, my name is Valerie Gonzalez. I'm a reporter with the Monitor, and I'm here with Mr. Juan Tijerina, who is running for Hidalgo County District Attorney. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Tijerina.
Well, thank you for having me and the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. And we're doing this interview in partnership with A Media, which is the Monitor, and Futuro RGV, McAllen, Citizens League, and League of Women's Voters. So just tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. Tijerina. You were telling me you're from Edinburgh?
I am born and raised in Edinburgh, educated in Edinburgh through the Edinburgh school system, graduated from Edinburgh High. Then went on to get my bachelor's degree at University of Texas. At the time it was Pan American, now it's RGV. And also got a master's degree from UT Pan American. So yes, I'm from the Valley. I've been here practically my whole life. I have worked in other areas, for example, Dallas and Austin, but I keep finding my way back. So born and raised in native Valley, I guess. Just expand a little on your qualifications for the district attorney's position. Okay, I've been licensed as an attorney now for 15 years. It'll be 16 years in November. I have had the opportunity to work with Dallas County District Attorney's Office and also the Hidalgo County District Attorney's Office, so I do have that prosecutorial experience. Otherwise, I have worked in the civil field, civil defense work. I've worked as a plaintiff attorney, and now I'm a solo practitioner. I have my own practice, and I am a general practitioner. However, my emphasis is criminal law because of my experience in that field.
Okay. What would, if you don't mind just putting it in your own words, but what are some of the responsibilities of the district attorney?
Well, the district attorney has a very important role in serving the community. A district attorney obviously follows through with the prosecution of cases, so they follow through with presenting cases to the grand jury, filing cases and formal charges against individuals, and ultimately seeing it through a prosecution, or even, you know, at the tail end it would be a trial. So it's an extension of law enforcement. It's important to have someone there who knows what they're doing, someone who can help with all the steps from the investigation to the filing of the cases, and of course prosecuting them to the best of our ability in representing this county.
If elected, what would be the top 3 priorities that you'd have for this office?
I think number 1 would be to solidify and build great relationships with local, state, and law enforcement in the area to be able to work together in investigating cases and also in the prosecution of those cases. Secondly, I think it's important to look to see what the organization is within the district attorney's office and try to better that. I have been informed that there's a lot of prosecutors or assistant district attorneys that have left for other jobs. Like I said, I've once been a prosecutor, so I know what that's like, and so I'd like to develop an incentive system for them to stay and be able to properly train them so that they are confident in trial and in courts.
Okay.
And thirdly, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
My priority too would be to initiate and create a public integrity unit. So that would be filled with, of course, support staff, investigators, and prosecutors focusing on corruption that takes place in this county. And so to be able to have that body to investigate and then ultimately prosecute, I think is important for the county.
I know this next question is not exactly up to you, but I know that as an attorney, you would have some insight. But would you be in support of having a law school created down here in the Valley? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the more opportunities we create for our young people here to keep them here, that way we can retain talent in the area. Too many times these young people get educated or educated elsewhere and don't come back, or get educated and leave. I think if we can have a law school here, I think that's important to be able to keep some of these very talented people here. And of course, the benefit that a DA's office would have with the law school here is too. It would be very important. Kind of going back to that goal of yours, which is to retain people, talent here, kind of avoid the brain drain.
Correct, correct.
Generally speaking here, there's problems with overcrowding at the jail. What would be some of the solutions that you'd be looking at to help alleviate?
Absolutely, there are serious problems. I think we're housing, the county's housing inmates in 4 different counties throughout the area. So from a defense attorney's perspective, it makes it difficult to communicate because they're so far. One of the important things to be able to reduce is I think we'd have to take a look at the individuals who are incarcerated and the type of cases they have, either to be able to move them quicker through the court system, so whether they plea or whether it's trying to reduce bonds on nonviolent offenses to be able to get them out and clear out, because I know there are millions of dollars being spent on that now just to house these individuals elsewhere.
And just, going a little bit further into that, talking about the current cash bail system, there's people who are concerned about those who are not able to make bond and who have to stay in jail longer and therefore, use more public resources to stay in jail.
Sure.
What is your position on the current bail system?
I agree with the system. I think judges are doing well and magistrates are doing well in setting bonds. You have to understand that bond is a whole system to ensure that these individuals return to court, right, when it's their day or in their time in court. But you do take a look at their socioeconomic status. You do take a look as whether they're a threat to, the community. And so I think they're doing a good job in evaluating that. There are things that, as a DA, you do have some discretion in terms of agreeing to lower bonds. But again, it all depends on the actual charge. Because it's real hard to speak in generalizations when, you're talking from a misdemeanor, possession or DWI case all the way to a murder case. So it's really hard to just speak in generalization. So it would be on a case-to-case basis. But I think there's room to be able to help the bond system to alleviate some of the overcrowding.
And there's differences between the types of bonds that are set, correct? The cash surety bond.
Correct.
And the PR bond, which means you can set a bond of $2,000. They can agree to pay that in the case that they don't show up to their hearing.
Exactly. Right? So that's a personal recognizance bond. So the individual themselves will be responsible for the amount of that bond if they don't appear. That's absolutely right.
And a lot of people obviously might prefer that one because they don't have to put money up front.
Sure.
For low-level nonviolent drug offenses, would that perhaps be a better solution for those kinds of, to alleviate, again, the overcrowding at the jail? I
think it would be. I mean, to be able to do bonds, so one of the things I'd like to do is also initiate different programs to be able to alleviate so that people aren't necessarily going into jail. But it's more of a deferred program, so people, to be able to get them out on a PR bond, but yet they're being supervised, right? So that's important. I know a lot of counties do that, which is like a pretrial release program. So to be able to create that here would also help in alleviating the program. And they're able to get out on PR bonds, and on top of that, they're being supervised. So the likelihood that they return to court is really good. The likelihood that they get treatment, if that's necessary, they can do that very early on in those programs.
Would that differ from what's happening now? I believe they have a monitoring system for some of those folks who make bail? They
do. So the current system that exists is what's called AIP, which is essentially house arrest. And so people can get bond reductions and being released on AIP, and during the course of their release of court, they are monitored pretty well, actually. It's a pretty difficult program. So that does exist at that level.
Would you want to expand that so more people would be able to make bond? Absolutely.
I'd like to. I mean, those are for violent offenders or people with criminal histories. I'd like to kind of minimize the supervision that requires to allow more people the flexibility to go to work, to receive the treatment they need, and go about their daily lives, although while being supervised.
Could you also explain to us what are some of the programs that you'd like to implement in the DA's office to reduce overcrowding at the jail? Sometimes there's alternative programs for those who have problems with substance abuse or
Correct.
Mental illness.
Yeah, and that's what I've kind of mentioned. But yeah, it's important to create some of these specialized programs. Like I said, of course, they would be arrested, but they would be released on PR bonds. And they would be able to get the help that they need, especially if it is related to mental health, which I do have a background in mental health. I have a master's in clinical psychology, so I have worked in that arena for years. So that is important to me to make sure that they get the assistance they need, as well as those who may have issues with substance abuse, whether it be alcohol, whether it be drugs, but to be able to have those deferment programs to keep people out of jail, I think is important, and get them on track to hopefully being successful in life, because ultimately that's what this should be about.
Is there a way to standardize who is determined to, go into those programs? Would there be like a conversation that you'd have to have with the prosecutors about how to make those decisions? Exactly.
I mean, you'd have to have a set of criteria. For someone who is going to take advantage of those programs. Too often we see repeat offenders, and I don't know, given the opportunity, let's just use this as a hypothetical, but if you give someone the opportunity to go through the program and then they reoffend, do they deserve a second opportunity? So we'd have to look at it from that perspective, but I think that for first-time offenders, I think that it's very important, and people who need the assistance.
There's also those, crimes that are victimless crimes, like possession of a small amount of personal use drugs, or even prostitution. For those types of crimes that are really more like a policy violation, would taxpayer resources, should they continue to be used to prosecute these cases?
Yes. I mean, the role of a district attorney is to enforce the laws, right? But we also, as a prosecutor, take an oath to ensure that justice is done. So I think each one of those cases would have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. But if someone breaks the law, then it's our job to enforce it. Now, again, there are programs that we could create to be able to minimize the exposure either in county jail, or even to minimize them, moving forward with formal charges, which I think help, because a lot of these people, even if it's arrest, they had a bad day, they do deserve second chances before they even get formally charged, because a charge really affects their livelihood moving forward, their earning abilities and so forth.
Just switching to immigration now. Last year, the governor asked a couple of any county who wanted to participate in Operation Lone Star to do so. And part of that program is to arrest, prosecute migrants who trespass private property. Okay. Although it's a federal authority, immigration is, the charges do come with jail time. For those counties who have opted in. Some of the counties are as close as Jim Hogg. They're participating in the program. I understand it's not a decision that would come up to the DA's office as to whether they want to participate or not. I believe that goes up to the judge in the commissioner's court. But if so, if we were to enter that kind of a program, how would you see the DA's office impacted by it?
Yeah, I mean, you would have a flood of cases, especially if it's criminal trespass, which is a misdemeanor case. So you would see a flood of cases, and one of the issues when illegal immigrants are arrested, there are times that ICE will put a hold on them. So even if they were to get out on bond, even if it was a PR bond, they're going to be sent over to the federal immigration system, right? So you ultimately lose them. So it's one of those really difficult situations, especially in our area, with the amount of individuals that do use this as a thoroughfare to get up north. But if it's the law and it's something that we have to enforce, then we would do that. Again, we would do our best to try to find alternatives as not to impact our community and taxpayer dollars.
Then there's the immigrants who we do have living here in the county. I'm sure as a resident here, you know that we have people who are not documented but who have been part of this community for years. Sometimes they are witnesses to crimes, and it's a little hard to gain their trust in order to, get a little bit more information about who to, really get any leads. How would you reach out to that community to try and create that trust?
Yeah, and again, and you're absolutely right. It's creating trust and confidence in the system, right? I mean, a lot of people think, and I have clients this way, that if they go to jail, then they're not legal U.S. citizens, they're going to be arrested. The system doesn't work that way, and so it's just about educating them and building that confidence to tell them, look, we need you. You're an intricate part of the case, and we need you to prosecute this case, and you're not going to be deported, because a lot of people, that's what they fear the most. So it's kind of alleviating that fear as well.
When it comes to capital murder or those kinds of crimes, what is your position on the death penalty?
On the death penalty, I mean, it depends on the cases. I know it's been recent years where we don't see very many death penalty cases. One that is current is the shooting of the DPS officer, so that currently is a death penalty case. So it would, you know, I agree with the death penalty. I would base it, though, on a case-to-case basis again, and the egregiousness, because the other, if it's not a death penalty, it's a non-death capital murder case, and the punishment is life, automatic life. Okay, so you know, we have to look at it from that perspective as well. But yes, it's something that I do agree with.
What are the factors that you feel should be considered when deciding whether a case is going to be, whether the DA's office is going to move on a death penalty?
Yeah, I think the egregiousness of the case, like I said, in that situation, it's terrible anytime that there is a death of an officer is important, and I think as a district attorney, that's a group of people that I, you know, am very, it's hard to say. My father was in law enforcement. My father graduated from law enforcement, so I highly, highly respect that group of individuals for their courage and the bravery, you know, and the fact that they're out there protecting us every day. So in a circumstance like that, I think it would warrant the death penalty because it is all about backing the blue, and it's about working together and trying to do the best we can for this county.
The other problem with that the pandemic created, rather, is there's just been so many cases, right, that kind of get backlogged because, you know, things had to come to a halt at the courtrooms. What would you say are some of the solutions that you are thinking about to propose to fix that problem and bring down the number of cases? Yeah,
and there is, and you're absolutely right. So there's a lot of cases that are in line to go to trial, you know, before a jury, and so that takes time. But there are a lot of cases that have just sat there, so I think it's important to work together with the defense bar, defense attorneys, along with judges of those courts to try to come up with a solution and recommendations, you know, that would be accepted by clients to be able to move and finalize some of these cases as opposed to them just sitting in county jail. You know, sometimes you find that it's a matter of just a few years that separate you from getting a deal done. And so I think it's important for the prosecutors, assistant district attorneys, to have the autonomy to make those decisions. And, you know, not only is justice being served, but also understanding the situation that the county is in with the overcrowding.
Of all the issues that we've talked about, or even some that we haven't, which would you say is the most important to this office, and how would you address it?
I think most important for me is the public integrity unit. I think it's my understanding, and again, I may be wrong, but I don't believe that there's been a public integrity unit ever in this county, and I think that that's important for the people. I think that they're tired of the corruption, you know, and the reputation the county has, and so for me, it's important to create that unit and hold people, regardless of who you are, responsible for any criminal activity.
I know that a lot of those cases are sometimes handled by the federal authorities, like the FBI, coming into like La Jolla and conducting investigations.
Correct.
But what would the public integrity unit's role be? How would they go about trying to crack down on the local corruption?
Yeah, and a big part of it would be working with local, state, and even federal agencies on possible leads. But, you know, the DA's office does have the authority to investigate cases and then prosecute cases. So even if we had to initiate our own investigations, we would do that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And that was Mr. Juan Tijerina, who is running as a Republican candidate for the position of District Attorney here in Hidalgo County. We have done this interview as part of a collaboration between A Media, which is Monitor, Futuro RGV Women, the League of Women's Voters, and McAllen Citizens League. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you.
Thank you
for coming.
Thank you.